Jeremiah True, who is are you 19 years old? That's what I saw in the news.
17 for
19 year
five
old.
more days.
Oh, okay. Happy birthday. 19-year-old Reed College student who has gotten in all this trouble and all this troublemaking for getting into an argument over campus rape stats. And Jeremiah, I've seen a lot of media coverage of this. Basically, people are criticizing you, going after you. What say you? I mean, give us what actually happened, and take it from there.
Well, I had been already having several disagreements with my conference, with my class, over the course of the past semester, just because we had different ideas about what certain texts in the class were actually saying. For instance, I thought that logic was more important than emotion, according to Plato, and other people thought that you simply couldn't do that, that that was a privileged thing to do, that it was patriarchal to think that reason was more important than emotion, and uh, it was absurd little stuff like that. And I was told by Poncho at one point that I was seen as being sexist, and I was just like, oh well, I'll just like watch my behavior and I won't speak so much, and I'll just really try to check myself. And then he decided out of the blue a couple of weeks ago to have a conversation about gender dynamics in the classroom, the gender problem, and I just figured that was as good a time as ever to ask people why they thought I was sexist, and I learned why they thought I was sexist, and then someone said, like, I heard you were talking about, like, rape culture with some people on campus, and I was like, yeah, well, I don't think rape culture exists because of this statistic, which is, well, it's overinflated, because if we do live in a rape culture, well, then according to RAINN, over the past 20 years, rape rates have fallen by 50%, which is amazing and a huge amount. And my argument was just that because rape rates have fallen so much, it would seem to me that our culture doesn't support rape. In fact, it seems like it's starting to eradicate it.
Right, and so I mean, this is a class with Professor Savory. Is that how you say his name? What's his first name?
Poncho Savory.
Yeah, and I've seen some people over at like Reason Magazine and elsewhere saying like, "Oh, this guy's committed to free speech," and they said that I think you had like an unusual request where
Hmm.
you wanted him to put the word nigger in the front of the piece. Talk about like why you did that, like the strategy behind it. I mean, I've got to say, like, it is when you asked me about it, I was like, look, yeah, this is supposedly a free country. People are free to say what they want.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
Basically, I just wanted to make the media think that I was an asshole, so that the people who were actually interested in what I was saying would come forward. So I'm basically trying to generate two sides in the media. Either it's a free speech issue, or I was continuously disruptive in class. And since the second side simply isn't true, I'm just generating more and more media attention because I'm giving all this evidence that I seem to be a jerkwad. But I'm not, and I'm just hoping that I can get more and more coverage until I can use this to launch my media career.
well, I mean, so basically, what you're doing is you're essentially trolling all these people, but you have a sincere commitment to there being no rape culture on campus. And talk about like what's happened to you, the reactions that you've gotten, um, kind of the media attention, and kind of feel free to kind of comment on that.
Well, the media attention has been, it's varied from nice to kind of just mediocre. Like, I keep saying the same thing over and over and over. I really enjoy interviews, though, because it's like another person's talking with me and kind of giving their own opinion. But the reaction on campus has been pretty sincere, uh, pretty pretty exacerbated because I started non-violently protesting and disrupting some events on campus and just like walking through the halls and calling people nigger because like if they're actually going to accuse me of being sexist and racist, then I figured I might as well like act as an actual sexist or racist might. And to date, I believe I've gotten 22 no contact orders, which are basically like the college's mini versions of restraining orders, and it's a record in the school's history. But yeah, somebody saw me yesterday and had a panic attack because they couldn't deal with seeing me. Um, my roommate's gotten really angry at me to the point where like he was actually getting really close to me and like almost physically threatening me. So I had to remove him from my room too, and it's just it's very lonely. But I sit restful in the fact that the truth is on my side.
Well, let's back up here a sec. So let's talk about kind of how how you decided like this is the day, this is how I'm gonna talk about this issue, and if you can like kind of give us a sense of Reed's commitment to free speech. I mean, because we were talking before the show, and essentially like the only kind of I kind of know Reed as kind of a hippie school that Steve Jobs dropped out of. I know it's up in Oregon, and that's kind of the extent of it. So why don't you give us kind of a sense of like what brought you to Reed, what you're interested in there, and kind of lead us, get us from like bring us up to kind of the current moment, and give us a sense of kind of what you're kind of hoping to accomplish, and we'll go from there.
Reed is a college that's really famous for being really heavily research-based, but it's also famous for its humanities program. It's pretty elite. It's a pretty high-end liberal arts school. I think it has one of the highest rates of producing doctorate-earning candidates in the country, if not the highest. The atmosphere on school is basically, well, like our unofficial motto is atheism, communism, and free love, if that gives you any indication of what kind of school it is. But an adage that I've taken to saying pretty frequently nowadays is, I love Reed, but I hate Reedies, just because there's a whole lot of victimhood and there's a lot of selfishness that goes on around here. And we constantly talk about the community, but we're not actually committed to community. We're committed to the community so long as the community serves me, serves myself. It's not a very good atmosphere as long as you toe the line, as long as you spout the same ideas as everyone else. You're pretty healthy. You're pretty okay. But if you disagree or you dissent, then you kind of get pariahized. And this isn't the first time that I've been excluded from a space that was mine by right.
And so, I mean, give us a sense of like what else have you done? I mean, I think most people would agree that college is kind of a time where you try on different ideas, you debate, you argue things, and yet it seems to me like I graduated college, let's see, like 4 years ago now. It seems like there's not as much debate or excitement or argument over issues as there once was on college campuses, and that most of these things are kind of becoming kind of more restrictive in speech, more restrictive in behavior. And if you could kind of talk about that in your context of what exactly you've done at Reed, what you're hoping to accomplish, and we'll go from there.
Well, I came to Reed basically because, well, it was a college, and it was a college that accepted me, and it was a college that gave me a great financial aid package. And I came here, and I was thinking maybe I wanted to be a science major, but I found that wasn't really for me. And then I thought, well, maybe I want to be a lit theater major, which is kind of completely on the other end of the spectrum. And then I was a poli-sci major, and now I'm not sure what I want to do. Really, I just came to Reed because I need to get an education, but I'm finding more and more that I can just get my education by opening up a book and reading than I can by going to class with a bunch of other idiots. So some other stuff I've done, there was this student activism takeover of one of our Hume 110 lectures. We called it Hume Takeover, and I gained a little bit of notoriety in the student body because I was the last speaker at that event, and I believe that's on YouTube. It's called Jeremiah's Speech. And the atmosphere on this campus, the idea right now is that certain speech can be violent, which I find to be interesting because I find that violence is violent, but speech is not inherently violent. I believe that threats can be violent and that sort of thing can be violent, but there's a certain attempt to kind of censor types of speech, and it's been interesting experimenting with how far I can push that line in my protests.
Well, I mean, obviously you're a black guy, right? I can tell. And I'm looking at the Reed College Quest and how Reed kind of used your, I guess, blackness to advertise how diverse they were. And yet, when you're asking them to actually be diverse, and to actually tolerate differences of viewpoints, they're kicking you out of class. I mean, seems like a contradiction, no?
Oh yeah, no, it's extraordinarily hypocritical, and regardless of whether or not I was actually being disruptive in class, which I was not, the faculty code actually says that Poncho has to go to the dean of faculty if there's a person who's being disruptive in class, and then there has to be an investigation to see if that person should be removed from class. And Poncho simply didn't do that. So regardless of whether or not I was actually being disruptive or, just giving a dissenting opinion, I shouldn't have been kicked out regardless. Yeah, it's not a very diverse place, and I've spoken to a lot of students who just like to lay low because they know that their opinions aren't welcome, and I feel like that's a very unhealthy space for academic learning.
Sure. I mean, and Reed, obviously, like a lot of private colleges, I mean, from the handbook that I saw, it commits itself to free speech and to academic inquiry and openness of discourse, and yet you're finding that's not the case, right?
Yeah, it's false advertising. Just nothing is what I thought it would be. I thought I came to read. I thought I would come to read and find a bunch of people who were really open-minded, really ready to share ideas. The marketplace of ideas. That's that phrase that's used a lot of the time. But I found that like the marketplace of ideas right now, it's experiencing a market failure. It's pretty bankrupt.
And so, like, talk about like some of the stuff that's happened with students. I mean, you come in there and you get into an argument about the 1 in 5 campus rape stat that says essentially, right, that college campuses, there's more rape going on in college campuses than in like the rape torture rooms of Black Africa or of Civil War torn countries. And you basically call bullshit on this, and what happens?
Well, I did it very gently, very politely, and they basically jumped down my throat. They said, "Well, that doesn't account for all the underreported rapes, all the unreported rapes." And well, actually, according to the website I cited, it did. RAINN says that 68% of all rapes, as many as 68%, go unreported. And they said one of the worst things about this campus is the overbearing use of anecdotal evidence, because that's just using that in an argument is just not valid whatsoever in an academic sense. But somebody said that, well, 2 of my friends have been raped in college, so I guess that number's pretty low. And it was just, I understand how it's a sensitive topic. However, rape culture is an academic theory, and it can be quantified, and it can be tested and disproven. But just, it was a very, very just quick and brutal reaction to me questioning the statistic, and I didn't do it in a violent way whatsoever. I didn't like belittle anyone's experiences. I didn't even know that anyone in the class was a victim of sexual assault.
Well, and also, I mean, they're self-described victims, right? And so I mean, as much as we want to, give people the benefit of the doubt, I mean, there is sort of a power that takes place where people claim to be raped when sometimes they're not. I mean, we certainly saw that with the Jackie Coakley situation at the University of Virginia, where essentially she just made this whole thing up and they suspended the fraternities. And now the Washington Post and the police are saying that there's no evidence that there even was a party that night, let alone that she was raped. I've seen that you said that college campuses are really, like, according to the media, whether it's true or not, we'll find out in a sec from you, but that you said that colleges are very difficult places to be a man. Kind of talk about what you meant by that, because I think people don't really know this kind of part of culture, of the college culture right now.
Well, college students generally like sex. However, because of this kind of air of paranoia and fear surrounding consent and what constitutes consent on college campuses, being in a physical relationship with anyone, it constantly weighs over your mind, like it's constantly hanging over you, this idea that, if this person wanted to, they could cry rape, and you could get brought up on trumped-up charges, and there would be next to nothing that you could do to save yourself. And it's just black and white, you raped her or you didn't, and if she says you did, then you're completely screwed, and you will get suspended, and you will be parietized by the school. what's worse is that I learned recently from my time on Honor Council that every year on Reed, at Reed's campus, on Reed's campus, there are 2 to 3 black men every year who are falsely accused of rape. Every year this happens, and it's just absolutely horrendous, and it's purely because of the government and the White House, and because of the oversight on like sexual assault on college campuses. I mean, they're not doing their job, they're not checking their facts, and they're not gathering data properly.
It's interesting. I mean, the Scottsboro boys. I mean, we have like a long history of people wrongly accused of looking the wrong way at white women, of sort of politicizing race and sex, and I mean, it certainly seems like the due process is even less for maybe the football players, and some of the more kind of masculine men out there, particularly when everyone's drinking. I mean, should men, sexually active men, in your view, consider not applying to Reed given this history?
I would advise men not to apply to college, to be completely frank. I don't think it's a very hospitable environment right now. It's really, it's turning into a bit of a witch hunt, and it's just not pleasant, and having to constantly second guess whether every single time you like touch a woman if she's going to constitute it as sexual assault is really just not pleasant. And the people here just aren't healthy, and nobody here really understands their own sexuality or how to be in a relationship healthily. So I would say, men, don't apply to Reed, don't apply to liberal arts colleges, and really just don't apply to college. Stay home, stay safe until the government does something to shift colleges away from this rape culture paranoia.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So like when I was going to Claremont McKenna, they had just changed the rules where there was like presumption of guilt, or what was it? It was
preponderance of evidence, was it?
Yeah, preponderance of evidence, right? Where basically they shifted the burden of proof in the school's like judicial board, and they basically made it so that you didn't have the same standards of evidence that you would have like in an actual criminal trial.
Yep.
And so what ended up happening is all these people were, are being falsely accused. I mean, there are many instances all throughout the country right now where this is kind of happening. I think it's, I don't know if I'd go as far as you would about not applying to college or not going to college, but it certainly seems like it's a dangerous place, like particularly, particularly as women can basically claim anything without any evidence, and then every aspect of your personal life gets investigated. I wonder, I mean, what's your thoughts on this affirmative consent proposal that people are doing? Like in California, you have to get like an affirmative yes or something to that effect before you initiate having sex, which seems a touch ridiculous to me, but I wonder your thoughts.
I think it can be a little mechanical. There's certainly something inorganic about it. I think sometimes that nonverbal consent is possible, especially in couples that are very healthily attuned with one another. One of the weirder forms of consent that I've run into is that every single sexual act that you perform on a person, you have to ask for their consent. So like if you're going to move from one part of the body to another, you have to ask for consent and that sort of thing. And it's just, if you don't, then technically you're like sexually assaulting someone. And it's just, the rules around consent are so limiting and restricting that it kind of takes the joy and the fun out of sex. And it's just not, it's not pleasant. It's not
right. I think the app that's being passed around now is the Good to Go app, which we didn't have at my college. Seems kind of ridiculous that people would even have, the Good to Go. This idea that consent can be kind of a blurred line, particularly when you introduce alcohol, which oftentimes exists. What I find interesting is so there was a survey done about how women like having casual sex just as much as men do, but they regret it afterwards in something like 1 out of 2 instances, and then a lot of that's just biological. That basically, speaking evolutionarily, right back in the day, way back as we evolved, women preferred kind of more masculine alpha males, and then when they got a beta male, the beta male was just for producing and raising children. And so what ends up happening is these college girls are having sex with alpha male types, and oftentimes inebriated, and then the next day kind of regretting their decisions. And there's such a powerful culture over saying you're raped. I mean, we saw this at the University of Virginia, where Jackie Coakley and Emily Renda could lie about being raped and be allowed to testify before Congress. And I think it's kind of interesting, just because we're kind of told that men and women are the same, and yet it seems like men are very much the burden party when it comes to sexual encounters. I mean, has that been your observation?
I think a lot of the time, yes. I was talking to Jessica Wilson, who's a counselor at the HCC here. That's the Healthcare and Counseling Center, and she was telling me about how certain instances she works with the accused, the respondents to accusations of rape, and she's told me that many times it just isn't rape. What happens between these people just isn't rape. It's somebody saying, "Wait, I'm uncomfortable. Could you please stop?" This other person stops, and then the girl, the woman, is convinced by her friends later on that she was raped by this guy because she felt uncomfortable for a little while, and then the burden is placed like almost entirely on men, and it's really not healthy, and it really doesn't feel safe.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I wanted to read something to you because obviously this has gotten a lot of media attention, and as I know from my my past in dealing with the campus feminists, or the people who go from campus feminists to being professional feminists, that oftentimes they don't even bother contacting you. I mean, it seems like there have been all these hit pieces written against you, but no one has even seemed to have reached out to you. I mean, is that your impression of kind of the media's dealing of your particular case?
Well, my theory is that the media doesn't check its sources, and if anyone actually read my petition, they would have a much easier time figuring out what actually happened in conference. But because everyone worked off of BuzzFeed, and then everyone worked off of those who worked off of BuzzFeed, and then it's just like spiraled out of control. No one checks sources. So no one's really reaching out to me. I got a contact. I got an interview with the Daily Beast this morning, so that'll be coming out tomorrow. I'm like giving interviews freely now. I'm not giving any weird demands. That was just like supposed to confuse the media, because I just wanted the story to get bigger and bigger, because I do want to hurt Reed's education, because they haven't been good to me.
Yeah, I think so. Ryan Cooper of The Week wrote this piece where he actually compared me to you. So I guess we're we're both being targeted here. But I wanted to read part of it because I think it's kind of revealing of the kind of things the kind of dishonesty that exists in the media. The guy's name's Ryan Cooper, and he's apparently an alum of Reed.
I read that piece.
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of read it for the audience. But upon getting kicked out of class, True registered a petition to change.org, demanding to be reinstated in his class, complete with a 3,500-word manifesto laying out his case. It makes for disturbing reading. Statistical quibbling about rape statistics are interspersed seemingly at random with copy-pasted emails, embrace of right-wing freedom feminism, insistence on his free speech rights, an explicit comparison between himself and Jesus, and an eerie peroration, I guess? I don't know. I don't know that word. Maybe I should have gone to read. I don't want to be a martyr, but I will do that if that is what is necessary to make a statement. He sent a similar 5,600-word letter to the entire Reed faculty. It's a mixture of messianic self-righteousness, melodrama, and gleeful trolling for attention that reminds me very much of Charles C. Johnson. And so it's not surprising that when contacted by Reason for comment, True said he would do it only under one bizarre condition. Before I interview you with you, you must agree to make N -- R, so nigger, be the first word in your article. He said something similar to inside higher ed. True is, of course, utterly mistaken about free speech. Free speech does not include freedom from criticism or freedom from consequences, especially not for disrupting class in a private institution. Um, uh, I kind of want to. Oh, hold on. Let me finish this actually, because it's interesting. But his conduct also misunderstands the nature of a class like Humanities 110. It's not a criminal trial where finding out what is true gets total priority over the feelings of the participants. Regardless of the thoroughness of one's argument, sometimes simple decency is more important. Um, Kind of interesting. I mean,
Kind of idiotic.
yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, messianic is a bit of a stretch for me. The letter I sent to the faculty was good enough to be published by Black and Right Media. So I don't think, because it's an expose and it's very well researched and it's actually a little bit sassy and quite funny, and it wasn't exactly a diatribe, but it was certainly pointed. Um, Explicit comparison to Jesus is also a little bit of a stretch, because I cited Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, because I do believe in treating everyone with decency and kindness and respect, and if I can manage it, love. So I feel like I was like supremely misunderstood here. The idea that feelings are more important than argument is also it's a fallacious claim, because we read Plato and Aristotle this semester, and both of those authors claim that reason has to take priority over feelings. And additionally, under the faculty code, dissent and therefore free speech is protected, and it's supposed to be encouraged and not grudgingly tolerated. Those are the words. So I think was his name Ryan?
Yeah, Ryan Cooper is the guy's name.
I think Mr. Cooper needs to, actually check his data, his facts, and his argument, because I don't think he actually understands what he's talking about.
Now, I mean, I think what's interesting about this kind of piece is that they do this kind of like standard lazy writing, where they say things like, he has disturbing views before they even introduce your actual views, right? Like, shouldn't we let the reader decide if these views are so disturbing, rather than kind of prejudicing them? And then this kind of like weird legalistic argument that free speech can't exist at private universities and they have every right to do whatever they want with you. It seems kind of like jarring that would exist in the same culture that essentially tries to make it more free for women to report any unwanted touching as sexual assault. Seems kind of an interesting kind of contrast. Obviously, like Reed bills itself as kind of like a culture of free speech, right? And I think we can have cultures of free speech without necessarily kind of limiting conversation. And then we can, if you can't do that at a university, I mean, where can you do that, right?
Exactly.
Now, I mean, talk to me about this Reason thing, because a lot of people have been sending me the Reason article. They've said like, oh, he's just a troll. He's not serious. I mean, what were you trying to say there?
Basically, I was just trying to point out that you can do anything you want to the media, and anything that you say can be taken out of context. And the reason for why I sent that request to Reason was simply to see whether or not they were comfortable with talking frankly about issues of race and issues of rape. And if people say, no, I will not report that, then I'm not willing to talk to them, as they will take whatever I say out of context and use it to, write a story that serves their own aims. And to that effect, my very own Quest, Reed's newspaper, took many of the things that I said out of context, and I asked them to use that word as the first word of the article, and they refused. And it was used basically to paint me as a lunatic. And it was quite disheartening, and I intend to bring an honor case against them.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me to do it, and I said, look, I'm not going to say it, but you're free to say it. I mean, I think part of the reason I wanted to do this video is so people can actually see, you're well-spoken, you're polite, you're a gentleman even. And going through, I mean, I recommend people read the Change.org petition, which I've retweeted and put up on my Twitter timeline. But I think people in general, they need to kind of understand that like this kind of anti-intellectual, emotional based argumentation is really like contrary to the whole purpose of the liberal arts, right? Which are, I mean, the phrase liberal arts themselves are, the purpose of it is to kind of make men free, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it's about making people free, and obviously Aristotle, Plato, they wanted freedom to be based upon objective reality. Um, but it's clear that that's not the case with this professor. I mean, talk a bit more about your interactions with the professor. I mean, he seems to kind of have it out for you in what I've seen in the media.
Well, yeah, he kind of contradicts himself. He says that I was not thrown out because people were made to feel uncomfortable. I was not thrown out because people were victims of sexual assault, but I was thrown out for a series of disruptive behaviors, such as saying that poor people can't create art, or justifying the Holocaust, or justifying racism. All of these things are things that he said were good examples within the context of the text which we were reading, and I could very easily explain them. I still maintain that Pancho is one of the greatest teachers I've ever had. He also says that I am the best writer in his class, and he personally vouched for me and my writing because I am such a gifted writer. So it's very disheartening to see him go back on his word and on his ideals, but I still maintain that he's a good teacher, and I'm very sorry to see him shame himself publicly like this.
And what do you think? I mean, are you hoping to get back into the class, or are you? I mean,
That's what, that's what
what?
I'm really getting.
Yeah, and so, what do you think will happen? I mean, what's your dream scenario, and what do you think will actually end up happening?
Dream scenario, I'm able to return to the class. I return to the class. I say, I'm sorry for hurting your feelings. I leave. I drop out of Reed. I sue. I get Reed's money. I donate money to a good charity. And then I start a media/political career.
I see. So you've kind of gamed it out. Now, what would you say though when people say that this is kind of a little self-serving? I mean, you're not, you're basically building up your career at the expense of Reed, and you're really just trying to hurt Reed.
Well, Reed was building up its reputation at the expense of my education. So I see no issue with fighting back.
So you do you feel cheated by Reed?
Yes, they've broken their own rules, they've flubbed their own principles, and they've completely gone against their own moral code. So I have absolutely no moral qualms with protesting nonviolently and attempting to get what is mine by right.
Now, what do you think? I mean, are you hearing from students that are supportive of you? I mean, what's the interaction been?
Basically, people say to me that they just want to keep their heads down. The people who are in support they think that I've got good arguments, but there's absolutely no reason to be arguing against these people, these crazy gender feminists, because they're just irrational and they don't see logical thought or reason as being worthwhile. And so these people advise that I just keep my head down and not really shake things up. But I really don't like that idea because I like expressing ideas freely without having to worry about what I'm saying or having to worry about censoring what I'm thinking, because I really just want to let my ideas out in the open, raw and beautiful, without having to pare them down for these idiots who can't understand basic argument and logic.
Now, I mean, they made some pretty like weighty claims about you and the Holocaust and you and poor people in art. I mean, do you want to address, like, give the full context of that? Because it seems like they're deliberately trying to slant it.
Yeah,
to make it.
I was hoping you'd ask me this because I can just blow them out of the water.
Sure.
So when I said that poor people can't create art, that was in reference to Alexandria. So when Alexander conquered Alexandria, which was a enormously beautiful city in Egypt, he supplanted the Egyptian aristocracy with the Greek aristocracy. So this means that the educated, the wealthy elites were all Greek, and that means that all of the high culture of the time would all be written in Greek. However, the lower class would be Egyptian, and they would be uneducated in Greek. So we were discussing at the time Theocritus' Idyls, which are a form of bucolic poetry, actually the original bucolic poetry, which is basically the poetry of shepherds and goat herds. So basically what I said was, I don't think Theocritus was writing these idyls for the lower class people for the Egyptians, because the Egyptians were uneducated and would not be able to read Greek, let alone understand that these bucolic idols were in any way meant for them. They were meant for the Greeks, so they could remember that they once came from being shepherds and goat herders and were now the wealthy elites. So it was absolutely idiotic that they tried and slander me with that. And Poncho even said that I was absolutely correct in saying that the meeting or the class after that class when that quote was taken out of context. And as to justifying racism and the Holocaust, Aristotle's virtues of character basically state that we have to be able to question our own beliefs. So what this means is that we need to be able to address when our own beliefs are wrong or in some way harmful. So what I pointed out was that because the virtues of character need to be taught, maybe racists in the Deep South in the 20th century lacked these virtues of character and thus couldn't see that they were being racist. They couldn't see that they were treating these people so horribly because they simply didn't see them as people. They weren't taught how to not be racist. They weren't taught how to question their own beliefs and think, well, is this right or is this wrong? It was simply rote. And actually, Poncho was the one who brought up Hitler and the Nazis. And I said, well, yes, that would apply there too. That was an improper application of reason because Hitler and the Nazis lacked virtues of character. So again, perfectly within the bounds of the text, very logically reasoned out argument, and again, taken out of context to try and, well, insult me.
Well, it seems like they're not really, giving you a fair shake. Let me ask you just one final question about how you think the media should cover these types of stories, and how they've covered yours, and kind of what you think we can all kind of learn from it going forward.
I would definitely advise the media to not take up a he said, she said. I would definitely advise the media to look at what I'm saying, as in look at my petition, don't look at what BuzzFeed says. I would advise the media to not take authority at their word. Don't listen to Pontius Savory just because he says he's a free speech advocate, because as we all know, figures in authority can very easily go back on their words. I mean, how many times have we seen politicians in scandal? How many times have we seen all of these people who are supposedly respectable absolutely go back on their ideals and their words? So basically just question everything and don't be willing to don't be willing to just take things at face value.
Well, on that note, I think we should just say good night, and hope to hear from you soon. And please let us know if there's anything new that happens in your case, and if there's any kind of adverse reaction. So good night, and thanks for coming on.
Will do. Thank you. Have a good night.